Welcome back to Fast Market here on the Schwab Network. It's time for cash tags. For that, let's bring in Megan Brantley. She's the VP of Research at Likefolio. Welcome back to the show, Megan.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, so we're talking Chipotle. I'm wondering what your data looks like. I mean, I understand they're losing their CEO. He was transformative for this company, hit all-time highs in June. We've seen a significant pullback, but it seems like they're outperforming as far as the data points goes. The other the other fast casual or fast food companies out there, Megan, at this point, do you guys still have the data that supports it? Because I tweeted out a question about, are you going to Chipotle more, less, or about the same? And already the initial feedback is people are going less. That's at 70% of the poll I'm taking. I'm hoping your data is probably better than my unscientific method.
Yeah, maybe people are just embarrassed to talk about how much they're going to Chipotle and what they're splurging for these bowls, because at least when we look in our data, in the past, I think for the past couple of quarters, we've talked a lot about sentiment, how we were worried that maybe Chipotle was maxing out some of its pricing power. We saw some negative feedback from consumers who were talking about portion sizes, so much that Brian Niccol had to come on and say, okay, this is how you can kind of, work the Chipotle workers to get a little bit of extra chicken in your bowl or things of that nature. But I do have some signs of positivity for Chipotle, at least in our data. We actually see some improving consumer sentiment, which for us is perhaps the longest term indicator of future growth. So we see consumer sentiment is actually up by about 2 points just over the last month. So, maybe Chipotle is getting better at those portions, or at least consumers are perceiving that they're getting better there. And then if you see this chart, I think this is really telling, because this is e-commerce growth, digital growth, and this is really important for a name like Chipotle. And you can see just a lot of outperformance here. And if you would have looked at this chart a couple of months ago, Chipotle was in the red. And so now we see a bit of a reversal in that trend. So we see signs that Chipotle is gaining momentum among consumers from a consumer happiness perspective, which is a nice long-term indicator. And we also see increased digital traffic. And so these two things, especially alongside the recent pullback in the stock, makes this start to look really attractive for us.
The worst thing, as you know, about being like an intermediate place, like coaching, is when your coach leaves for a cooler place and you're left holding the bag back at the school that the coach left for, right? We get that a lot here in Illinois, where our coaches all leave for better schools. Now, Brian Niccol leaving for Starbucks, that's a pretty big high-profile hire for Starbucks, and it leaves a void at Chipotle. But that doesn't mean Chipotle's not doing extremely well, and that's making an assumption that the next CEO is not going to be competent. They're still trying to grow from about 3,500 stores to about 7,000. As long as they keep growing at that pace and correct these little nuances about size and social media and go on a little bit of a charm offensive, this is still a company doing extremely well that frankly is 6 months, do I have it right, down 15%? No, 3 months, down 15%. So, they've taken a chunk out of the valuation of this company. Now, it's still not cheap compared to other fast food places, but it is cheap if it keeps growing, like towards 7. If they're hoping to double the amount of stores in the next couple of years, then it's not expensive, Megan.
Right. And I think that the way that they're growing is really smart also. Whenever we look at people talking about their Chipotlanes, I think that, the company plans to open 300 new restaurants in 2024, and 80% of those are featuring these Chipotlanes just for these drive-through orders. And that really helps with speed and efficiency and margins and all of these things that is good for Chipotle, and it's also good for the consumer. And so Chipotle is really a leader in terms of efficiency. It's not just looking at efficiency in terms of how fast can it get people through its drive-through lanes, but also in its store, how can it prepare bowls quicker? How can it kind of empower its staff to be more efficient? And I think that also helps Chipotle, and we may not necessarily talk about that enough. That doesn't usually turn up in our data until we look at consumer happiness levels, with how happy the consumer is with the process of ordering and receiving food from Chipotle. And another thing that is really interesting that Chipotle is excellent at is leveraging its limited time offerings. So, right now, if you go to order from Chipotle, the menu might look pretty stale, but it's testing this honey Chipotle chicken that the company says has received the highest marks of any chicken innovation it's ever tested. And so it's continuing to push the envelope there. We saw really nice results whenever the company released its pollo asado chicken. And so I think that this is another area to watch for as it kind of releases these new menu items to kind of drive the hype up and entice consumers to come back in and try things. So there's still a lot of growth drivers and growth levers that Chipotle can pull. And just because it lost a really good CEO, we don't necessarily see that as a long-term negative for the company yet, especially while we're watching consumer metrics actually continue to improve. Maybe the interim CEO and leadership had enough time with Brian Niccol that, there's still a strong vision and strategy that the company is marching toward. And we don't see signs of negative implications, at least in the consumer experience yet.
Yeah, the new CEO, Scott Boatwright, he's actually was there a year longer than Brian Niccol
Right.
before he left. He was the chief financial officer taking over that role. So he's been with the company. But Megan, when you look at the data that you guys have, would you guys put this in the box that like Folio would be a buyer here on this dip, that is pullback, even though over the last year, stock's still up 36%?
Yeah, we like this. Every pullback, especially with this one for Chipotle right now, we are a buyer of this pullback specifically. We wouldn't be surprised to see some near-term volatility as the company kind of works through leadership changes. And we do see mounting pressure facing the consumers. Whenever you look at a lot of different names, we're starting to see signs that consumers are really pulling back. We haven't necessarily seen this impact Chipotle yet, but that doesn't mean that it won't. But we do think that long term, especially with those improving happiness levels, this is a company that has a lot of brand power, that has a strong vision and tremendous growth prospects. So we are certainly bullish from here.
All right, great stuff. Great data as always, Megan. Appreciate it.